The 80s spawned many top bands during that decade, from Spano Ballet to Duran Duran. Wales's contribution was Scritti, Politti, and for the next 45 minutes here on Choice Wales, we follow their story.
Somebody sent me an email the other day with a quote from Hunter Thompson. It's about the music business, and it says, I'll read this to you, it says that the music business is a cruel and shallow money trench, a long plastic hallway where thieves and pimps run free and good men die like dogs. There's also a negative side.
After a decade in the wilderness, the enigmatic Welsh musician Green Gartside is back on the road. His group, Scritti Politti, influenced a generation of bands and songwriters in the 1980s. Now he's back promoting his groundbreaking new album, Anime and Bonamy, in America. A pioneering fusion of musical styles, it has already received international critical acclaim. Scritti Politti became a household name in 1985 with their album Cupid and Psyche, a landmark in musical production. But success had a downside, and Green's disaffection with the demands of the music industry came to a head after promoting their follow-up album, Provision. Renouncing the business, Green retreated to the South Wales of his childhood and spent the next 10 years walking in the countryside, drifting into local pubs and wondering if he would ever make music again. The distance travelled from Tinseltown to the Boogie Down was a rough ride, but a unique and extraordinary journey. Like many bands before them, Scritti Politti began life at an art school. Galvanised by the bravado of punk, three idealistic young men sought to express their political ideas through music.
Around about that time, the Clash and the Sex Pistols and the Damned and the Heartbreakers turned up to Leeds one night, and all on the same bill. And so I went to see them and was immediately persuaded of the fact that I should, forego the typewriter, the word processor, and the Oxford Companions of Philosophy, and I should pick a guitar up instead, which is what I did. There was also at that time an almost fetishized business of being bad at your job. I mean, the worse you were as a guitarist, the better you were. Loud, confident and wrong, I think, was the catchphrase.
The band moved to London and joined the thriving do-it-yourself record movement. With the help of Rough Trade, one of the brash new indie labels, they were able to make their own singles and sell them directly to shops, bypassing established record companies.
Number 1 Carroll Street, this is where it all began. It was tiny, we didn't have a bathroom to begin with, and we didn't have hot water. There was no electric fuses. When we moved in, they'd taken the fuses out. We used to have to go for a bath up to Kentish Town baths. It was interesting times, There's a lot of violence around. Always incredible amounts of violence. We used to go out to gigs from here around all over London, and it would be a rare occurrence to get back without at least one of our lot having been attacked, senselessly by somebody for something. I think a lot of my friends from those days still sort of bear the scars and stuff. That was good fun. Lots of mad things happened here.
Moving away from the punk-influenced music of the early days, Green steered the band towards a new, more refined sound and soon gained wider acclaim.
The Sweetest Girl, I think that was a big thing for us when the Enemy decided they liked us. You know, we got the front cover a couple of times, and they gave away a cassette with the paper, and I think The Sweetest Girl was like the first song on the cassette or something, which suddenly meant that we had a much larger audience.
With the success of The Sweetest Girl, Scritti Politti produced their first album, Songs to Remember. They caught the attention of the music press, and expectations were high. But on the verge of international acclaim, Green had misgivings about their musical direction. He decided to take time out, a pattern he was to repeat later in his career.
At that moment, you know, when post-punk got comfortable, you know, when Rough Trade got big and the whole indie thing kind of settled down, it was just so dull. This was nothing. This was done. It was an empty gesture. I took some time out. I went back to Wales, got a cottage. That was the first time I did that, to rethink everything, really, sort of put the band on ice.
After a year away, Green was back with renewed ambition, refreshed and in demand. It was time to broaden his horizons, to leave Rough Trade and sign with a major record company.
I think he signed with Virgin because he felt, quite rightly, that we didn't have the financial weight at Rough Trade to be able to finance an assault on the charts. And I think he's completely right.
The competition to sign him was absolutely intense, because Scritti Politti were the best act that there was. The Sweetest Girl had come out, had incredible reviews. The album on Rough Trade had been incredibly well reviewed, and he was just different to what everybody else was doing, because he sang very sweetly, he wrote really good songs, and so people wanted to sign him, and therefore he could dictate terms.
I'd grown very disillusioned with the whole independent thing in the UK, and decided that the way to go, for one reason or another, was American pop, R&B. And I resolved to sort of go to New York and completely reinvent the sound, and indeed the group. I mean, it was a completely different band. The original lineup split, and I recruited 2 new members in New York, and so we began a whole new chapter.
Well, joining me now in the studio is a man who changes musical style like the rest of us change shirts, I reckon. It's Green Gartside of Scritti Politti. Do you have a band now? Is there a Scritti Politti?
Yes, there is. There's myself and 2 New Yorkers that I've been working with throughout the whole LP, David Ganson and Fred Marr, who are watching this somewhere. And so we are a group, yes, Scritti Politti is a group.
Okay, look forward to seeing some live shows.
Okay, good.
The video, shall we have that now? The video for the near-hit single from Scritti Politti, The Word Girl.
Expression, we were just all on the same page. I mean, we'd sit and we'd talk, and it was just, we were like, yeah, that's exactly, you know, I mean, we were all of one, you know, mind, basically, and we knew that we wanted to, you know, sort of push the envelope in the studio, which was really difficult at the time technologically. It was the sequencing and sampling and stuff was all pretty early days.
The first time, baby, that I came to you,
it was a complete change of priorities, emphasis, a kind of change of politics, really.
His lyrics were just great. It knocked me out. I was really, really impressed. This is it, you know. These guys are great. This is perfect.
When we first started working together, it just kind of developed from one thing to the next. So I was never like decided, okay, let's go make a record. We just worked on a tune or 2, and then it went okay, and we would work on another couple of tunes, and it just ended up turning into an album that we had done.
remember when I was living in New York and we began to get some success here, I really had very little measure of how much success we were having, and I was walking down here, I think maybe David and Fred were with me, and in the concrete which had recently been laid, I think somewhere very near this cinema, we saw Scritti Politti had been kind of, you know, carved out with a stick in the wet concrete. But I can't exactly remember which bit of street it was on. But that's when, I guess it was around about that time that the whole business of popularity, you know, and began to register. The fact that what had previously been, you know, really a kind of academic interest, really, and a bunch of fun had turned into something else.
Fun or not, Cupid and Psyche was a best-selling album with many international hit singles. Green and Scritti were now on the world map. Musicians, public and press alike praised their innovative and meticulously crafted sound.
There's this play, there's this tension between the music, which is like, to me, almost like the sound of perfection. It's like the production is perfect, crystalline, incredible range and rhythm, but the things that Green is talking about are often tragic.
When I was 17, it was a world to know about.
That's what, to me, takes their records past like forgettable, quote-unquote, dance pop records.
Green has a very unique pop voice. It's high, it's trebly, it's clear. For some reason, no matter what year you're listening to it in, it always sounds about 14 years old. That's physiology, that's nature. That's an unusual thing. It's lovely, shining gift from God.
Our sound, so to speak, was then kind of stolen by several other producers and artists and things. And I think while we went away, the sort of sound of Cupid and Psyche got knocked off, for the lack of a better way of putting it. And I think, I mean, we were aware of it. It wasn't, you know, we didn't get frustrated by it or anything. We just I actually took it as a compliment, you know.
I think it sold about 1 million copies around the world, and we had like top 10 records just about everywhere, yeah. So, and that's when the horror began. Although there was the success with it, just the sort of vapid insincerity of all that, and just how soul-destroying and pointless it seemed, became a problem for me. I think already the seeds of discontent and whatever was sown, my kind of distaste of the industry and really my place in it was becoming a bit overbearing. If it isn't bad enough, you know, having to sort of go out and whore yourself around, then when you have to go out and sell a record that you're not really happy with, that gets really uncomfortable.
With the world at his feet, Green was increasingly dismayed by the demands of the industry. After recording his next album, Provision, the treadmill of promotion became too much to bear.
I'd already stopped playing live because of bad stage fright and getting panic attacks. So I was really thrown back on the business of doing videos, TV shows, radio shows, in America particularly, doing lots of provincial kind of like breakfast TV things. And, there was a rapidly growing sense of dread at doing these things.
You're feeling quite creative, are you, in the realms of...
Yes, it's important for me to leave it alone for a few months.
It'd be early in the morning and you'd be on a sofa with people in orange pants-stick makeup.
Write something.
And you wouldn't know who they were, they wouldn't really know who you were or care.
It's good. I usually do manage to
cobble a tune together if I have to.
I have to ask you this. How can anybody be called green?
Ah, well, it was very, very uncomfortable. So I quit. I sort of stopped everything, severed all my ties with everybody I knew, personally and professionally, and gave it all up, which I think was the right thing to do, because it sucked. Prior to that, I'd always thought that going back, if you ever went home, that was like an admission of defeat in some way. Going back there was something I had resisted, even to visit. But then I really had no option. As much as it was of going home, it was also an avoiding everywhere else. When I got there, I felt pretty low, but I decided it was the right thing to do, and I suddenly found life in Wales, without making music, infinitely preferable.
I close my eyes, we were there, jump for a swim.
I was born in Cardiff, and then it was Bridgend and Ystrad Philly, Newport, Cwmbran, I don't know. Very peripatetic childhood. My parents were keen on moving about once a year. Just went on and on. But it was all in South Wales, and this is part of South Wales that I particularly feel strongly about and have fond memories of. And there are some people in the area that, you know, friends of mine that go back to childhood still here. This time, I would say it was about 7 or 8 years that I took out.
No. You'll go again?
I kind of slowed down my metabolic rate, you know, by being incredibly slothful, and I did very little other than read books, go for walks, go to the pub, and that was all I did. And for a long time I didn't make any music at all myself. I had a room in the cottage with all my gear in it, but I would rarely want to even open the door to that room. I'd occasionally open it and peer in, you know, at sort of all this equipment gathering dust, and you know, a shiver would run down my spine, and I'd slam the door and, you know, go read a book and walk up a lane or something. I really didn't. I was that, you know, unhappy with the business of making music. For a long time, I didn't want to go near it.
When he essentially took time out at the end of the 1980s, I think a lot of people thought fine. I mean, he'd worked very hard for 5 or 6 years. He'd put out 2 albums and you know, pounded the promotional pavement all over the world in support of them. The second one hadn't done that well. It was probably felt that, yes, it's a good idea for him to go away and take stock, recharge his batteries. And of course, you know, the record industry is premised on constant change. And, you know, artists do come and go. We accept that. That's part of the business.
I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a part of me that recognised the fact that what I was doing was kind of avoidance on a grand scale. And this was an avoidance that I could afford to do just because royalties kept coming in, you know, much to my amazement. And for all those years I didn't have to worry about money. It affords you the luxury of not facing up to anything, which isn't necessarily a luxury at all.
Nobody around here had heard anything from Green or Scritti Politti for years. His reappearance coincided with discussions that we were having about possibly putting together a greatest hits album, which is what you normally do as a kind of gold watch exercise. Thank you and good night. And suddenly, from nowhere, there was Green with a cassette of tunes which the people who heard claimed to be exceptionally good quality.
Virgin's response was completely positive, not particularly to the music, although it was very positive to that, but simply to the idea of having another Scritti Politti record, because he had been, he was a key artist for Virgin, or certainly, I certainly felt that, and I think the people at Virgin felt that, and he is what I can only describe as a true artist, and there aren't very many. It sounds a bit pretentious to say that, but there aren't very many true artists, if you like. There are quite a lot of pop groups and quite a lot of pop stars, but people who make significant and groundbreaking records are few and far between, and he had been, and as far as I'm concerned, continues to be one of them.
Play on the bottom.
Oh.
I think the reason why he was welcomed back was partly because Virgin does have a tradition of allowing artists to go their own way.
Began to decline.
Questions are not asked. If the musician is still in good nick and the songs are good, then fine, he's back and we're going to release it. In his case, I think there were particular residual loyalties because he was one of the, not just commercially successful artists, but one of the most interesting, sort of emblematic of a lot of the things that Virgin Records likes to think of itself as embodying as a label, quite pioneering, quite adventurous.
You know, I wish I knew what's here on Highbury Fields, the West Side Highway.
The fact that it was unconventional, if you like, for him not to have put anything out for 11 years almost became a plus.
He only works when he feels completely confident about the material.
Did you take that vocal?
And when he is satisfied with it. I think there are a lot of artists who maybe do put out an album every 1 or 2 years, either for financial reasons or for pressure, because of pressure from the record company. But he has, perhaps he's less sort of mercenary than other people in that going for the money is not the most important thing to him.
People ask me what was the starting point, you know, when did the little light go on that said, okay, you've had enough of being a recluse in Wales and it's time to make a record again. And I think it was really the arbitrary event of my sister living in London calling me up, and she wondered if I'd like to take the flat that she was living in. So I took a place in Hackney, and from there slowly kind of acclimatised myself back to society.
He likes to tell us that he sat around in pubs playing darts and drinking Guinness. Well, I'm sure there was a certain amount of that, but he started working on the songs which eventually turned into Anomie and Bonhomie sometime in the middle of the 1990s. So actually, he only actually took 3 or 4 years off, and it's quite possible, knowing him, and he's a fairly kind of hyperactive character, it's quite possible that he was working on musical sketches all that time. And what is definitely the case is that he was listening to music and to some degree redefining his own creative objectives during that period.
I used to come up to London on shopping trips when I was in Wales and sort of buy a bunch of vinyl, a mix of dancehall music and hip-hop or whatever. And I used to get these skateboard videos as well. And they always had soundtracks that were like a mixture of hip-hop and American guitar stuff. And go back and listen to it. And you know, I was really seriously in love with the stuff. I guess I still am. So these ideas started to come to my mind about like mixing up some hip-hop influences and some guitar pop influences, and perhaps ways to do it that used guitars in the same way that either DJ Premier or Pete Rock would sample horns. Kind of helped to keep me alive, I think. I was really, really passionately in love with it. And it was through that, really, that when I realised that the music room upstairs, you know, the Gathering Dust, as I've said, contained the technology that could make that kind of music. I had samplers and I had, you know, sequencers and all the rest of it. And it was that urge to know really what was it like to make beats, you know, not to rap, but to provide the bedrock stuff that East Coast hip hop was built on at that time. I went to America, and I was lucky enough to be in New York in '79 and, you know, go to some shows and clubs and stuff and hear a lot of stuff as it was breaking on the radio. And it was just always a big deal for me. I realised what it was that I'd denied myself this very profound pleasure for a long time, and I wanted it back. So I slowly emerged from the Welsh wilderness to do that. It's unarguable to me that America has colonized the unconscious of the world in the 20th century. I have a great deal of love for the place. I'm just grateful having been born able to speak American. That sounds ridiculous, but that's true.
Returning to New York, Green invited a number of hip-hop artists to work with him on a new album, Anime and Bonhomie, including Brooklyn-based Mos Def and Los Angeles rapper Defari.
You know, I think Green is a b-boy, you know. I just think he's a guy who is extremely talented, who survived this long in the game because of his talents, you know, in the group. And now he's probably at a point in the game where he really wants to do some stuff that he's always wanted to do, you know. And if I can be a helping hand in that, man, whatever, you know, I'll do it all, you know. Anything for Green, because he's a classy guy, treats us real good, so it's just a real simple situation like that for us, you know. Yeah, I'm happy for him. I hope the album skyrockets.
What's very interesting about what he did with the vocalists on Anime and Bonhomie was that they're really intrinsic parts of the musical construction. These aren't hip-hop records. They're not typical pop records, though, either. These people are threaded through. It's almost like Green is really just more like providing the accents on his own record. It's really interesting to hear. It's a really interesting way of imagining kind of using the feel of hip-hop music without betraying either hip-hop or what you're doing.
Having, you know, gone away from music for a long time, if I was going to come back and do it at all and find it bearable, then I'd have to be sort of honest about what I liked and you know what my influences were, my passions, and I've been listening to, you know, hip hop for, I guess, you know, 20 years or something, you know, almost, and that's as long as I ever spent like listening to the Beatles or the Beach, anything else that's been very important to me. And it would actively not be dishonest of me to make a music that didn't admit or express that influence. And providing I'm not, you know, sort of stepping up to the mic and trying to rhyme, you know, that would be, for me, that would be utterly bogus.
One very simple device would be for me not to do very much on the hip-hop tracks, but leave tons of space for people who I admired, and I just would introduce some elements of melody and stuff over the beats. But doing the beats is the most fun. I think, you know, I could gladly spend my entire life just making beats.
Yo, the only thing major, don't waste your time in bed. My timing is rare. Take time to prepare. No time for fear. How many times I said it this year? At what time y'all gonna realize this time is near?
The reason I have a lot of fun with Green is because he always has some strange combination of things he wants to try that you would think this is never going to work. This bit and this bit, you can't really do this, and then it's kind of like the process is trying to figure out how you can make these various things work together. And that was the fun thing about working with him back on Cupid and Psyche, and that's the fun thing working now, is that it's always a challenge to kind of try to put these different things together, and there's always a concept about what you're trying to do. And it's a lot of fun.
When you start living comfortably, while I switch and then you dip right from under me. Don't front for me. I want to be perfectly clear. Time is here.
I have my ideas for the sort of choruses on the rhyming tunes, and I just tell Lee or Mos Def or Red Cloud or T-Love, any of the other people I work with, what the song was about from my point of view, and they would then figure their parts out from there. I know, like, Mos Def would go off and walk around the streets of New York for like an hour or maybe 2, and come back with a whole like 16 bars made up in his head, and just go straight to the mic, and it was a pretty impressive thing to see.
It's said that if you don't understand race, if you don't understand racism, if you don't understand the history of black people, you can't really understand deeply anything that black people say or produce. Certainly not the music that we produce. I've always said that hip-hop is a map of black people. It's really like, it's a form of, to use an old term, virtual reality. It's a way that we imagine and create spaces that we don't necessarily inhabit, or dream spaces, places to live and exist. I remember very early on going to jams and seeing guys waiting to rhyme, and they'd be lined up like 9 of them waiting to get their turn on the mic, which is striking, to say the least, that these guys have so much eagerness. But I'm saying even beyond the eagerness to perform is the simple fact that, for the most part, an African-American male will never hear his voice amplified. He'll never give directions to anyone. He'll never take charge of any situation. For the most part, the work he inhabits will be abstract. He is given directions on what to do. In hip-hop, that's reversed. The person at the mic is called the MC, Master of Ceremonies. And his job is to tell people what to do, literally. Throw your hands in the air, and people throw their hands in the air. So this has a contextual effect that is very strong because of the simple reality of black life. And part of, I think, if you will, the political agenda of hip-hop is to return us to subject mode. I am this. I am this. The identity. And of course, identity is basic to all music and all art.
Back in the beginning, it was a very, very historically, geographically specific, historically specific. It was a New York thing. It was from the boroughs, and and it's. It seemed to be very, very specific, of a community. Really, it was a community's voice, a community's music, and that community has grown. And I'm kind of just like excited to be part of it if I can.
He's always been a total hip-hop fanatic, from way back, and I think he just went and did it this time, because it never occurred to at least not. I don't remember him mentioning it, but it never occurred to us to have like a rapper guest on Cupid and Psyche or Provision. Like, it just didn't seem like it was going to work.
Give me something I can ride and ride.
I think it's a great record. Once again, sounds incredible. A beautiful collage of different influences. The artwork is probably Green's best artwork ever. It's absolutely stunning to me, all the little icons and things. I was just telling him I hope they don't screw it up over here in America, because they get very chintzy with the packaging budgets over in America, which is really annoying.
The album's called Anomie and Bonhomie. They're both French words, obviously, anomie, bonhomie. Neither of them have exact equivalents in the English language. And that's of interest to me because, questions of language, meaning, interpretation have always been important to me. Anomie would be to do with the condition of hopelessness or despair, and bonhomie would be to do with the kind of atmosphere that you might find in a pub in Wales. Somewhere along that axis of, anomie, bonhomie, you will find me between the two, so that kind of made sense.
Green's interest in language and philosophy has become one of the trademarks of his music. On his first album, Songs to Remember, he named a song after the eminent French philosopher Jacques Derrida, after which they met in Paris and became friends. References to his ongoing interest in philosophy continue in his music, as does his association and friendship with Jacques Derrida.
Green's interest in structuralism and other areas of philosophical inquiry, I think, has been of interest to a certain tranche of listeners and fans of his. But the great thing, of course, about the way he does it is because he's layered his music so successfully. That's something you can dip into if you want to, but it doesn't provide a bar to enjoyment if you don't. And that's one of the really subtle aspects, I think, of his work.
He seems a sort of highbrow kind of guy, and comfortable talking about structuralism, and at the same time he's got music that's based on the streets. So you've got hip-hop wrapped up with this sort of wider shores of literary criticism, and that's very, very unusual. It's not that you have to notice this to enjoy the records, but he knows what he's doing, and it's there.
I think, there are probably quite a lot of sort of semiology students in the 1980s who were genuinely intrigued by a lot of this stuff, and certainly we've seen in a lot of the press coverage we've had recently that is still something with which he is quite closely associated, and it's a good sort of calling card in a way. It's part of what we could almost cynically refer to as his image.
So you went yes, that was
I can imagine why and how our common interests, are, let's say, crossing one another. Okay. I was like an industry there's an influence on the concept of the music, the way he thinks of, he conceives of the music. The way he mixes certain poetics, I mean the songs, the words, the sentences, the way he plays with at least the linguistic side of his music. This I can understand, and I simply admire and enjoy the musical embodiment of this linguistic or poetic invention.
As a singer or as a writer, things that you do that people rarely comment on because it probably doesn't occur to them. There's certain sounds that are good to sing, and then you have to justify why you keep singing words like sweet and girl, and it could be, in a different era it would be moon and June. But these are actually sonically very attractive sounds, and his songs are peppered with them. And I sometimes think he kind of tries to justify that by offering a critique of the pop songwriter's art. So a song like the word girl, wrapped up in its sort of tuneful splendour, with he's not scared of it, not scared of a tune. The first time, baby, that I came to you. It's ambitious, and he's commenting on the way that the word girl is used in popular music, and that itself is quite unusual. So I think there's a sort of refinement that's gone from his early days through the records, and he's still doing that.
Time keeps slipping.
You always want approbation, you always want to be liked, you always want to receive some approval for your work from the rest of it. But I guess you ultimately have to realize it ain't going to kill me if people don't like what I do, then I'm still going to wake up tomorrow and enjoy walking around the city. Mm-hmm. There'll still be New York will look beautiful again tomorrow, and the sun may shine and the sky will be blue, and it'll be profoundly lovely. And if somebody wrote something bad about me or my record the day before, that's okay. Mm-hmm. I think whereas in the past, it would have really, really upset me. Mm-hmm.
While Green has reconciled himself with the critics and the ever-changing desires of the public, the industry waits to see if he'll achieve the mass popular appeal that he previously threatened with the release of the first single from the album, Tinseltown to the Boogie Down.
Tinseltown to the Boogie Down is about work and maybe leisure and possibly even death. Tinseltown being Hollywood on the West Coast, the Boogie Down being the Bronx. It's about the perception of work and its priority and its how salient or otherwise it is for life in America.
The timetables keep turning. You got the both ends burning up. And all the lies you've been learning to keep your future on hold.
He has the courage of his convictions, is what I would say, in that he makes the music that he wants to make, that he's very, very demanding of himself, but that generally the finished music that he comes out with is very, very exciting and different to what everybody else is doing. He doesn't take shortcuts.
As anyone in the industry who's ever worked with him knows, Green is not a cheap date. He likes to do things very meticulously. Budgets tend to overrun as a consequence. But and the point is, the quality of the music was so obviously high and so there, you could scarcely walk away from it. Although the record earned an enormous amount of respect, we had a struggle getting it actually onto the airwaves. And of course the fact that they don't play live meant also we had a problem with television. So, to cut a long story short, we have been disappointed commercially, although, you know, we've certainly delighted with the quality of the music.
Watched us standing in the station. You were cold.
What I hope for Green and Scritti Politti is that the sort of level of creativity that we've seen from him in the last couple of years is sustained. In a sense, this is the first part of a major comeback, because I do think he is a really extraordinarily talented songwriter, and I think his ability to absorb and refract influences is extraordinary. We'll have to work hard to get that message across because of the gap between the period when he was commercially successful and now, but I think we'll get there.
The demands of the promotional circuit takes Green across America, and so far he's staying the course.
I guess not knowing, about the future as well is something I really like. I hate plans. I'm much happier not knowing where I'll be or what I'll be doing in 12 months' time. From here, I'm just a kind of hop, skip and a jump away from an old folks' home, really. But if I'm allowed to continue to make music, that's really what I would like to do. I'm quite surprised to find myself still involved in it somehow after 20 years. And pretty keen just to see how far I could push that. And there's no good reason, other than the industry making my mind up for me, why I shouldn't continue to make music, because it's a lot of fun.
Get nitty gritty with Scritti Politti, me and Green.
Out of control, the far right cash.
We're never amateur, pure like lightning, whether on stage or holding a page writing, or freestyling on radio frequencies. Los Angeles city is scandalese, cash and creeds bleeds, and it's a pity in a raw deal city. Look for the new track with Tash, the far eye, and Scritti Politti.
To the test like the weight I bench press. My tongue's a gun from London to Los Angeles.
Yeah, this is LA's finest, the far eye. Down with Scritti Politti forever.
And for me, the music means